This is video log entry 190 and it's about noon. Um, I've been busy as usual. I always say that at the beginning of the video because I am. I actually just submitted my transcripts for the college I'm potentially going to during the spring semester. I had some catch up to do because I missed last week's 3 courses over at the Bible course that I'm currently taking, and fortunately I actually had one of the evangelists help me out with catching up. I have one more course or lesson to take. Sorry, not one more course. Today at around 4, I think. Was it 4? Yeah, it was 4. So I'm going to be doing that before. Well, actually, we don't have class today because it's only Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. But yeah, so I'm going to be doing that to catch up. Yesterday, actually, we were going around like the symbolism behind, fire that is actually mentioned in a lot of verses in the Bible. Now, I think most people would look at the physical characteristics of a fire and say it can be damaging within certain environments, but in other environments it's not. And the key takeaway for that lesson yesterday was due to its physical characteristics, right? The dependency on the environment of that particular fire can be translated figuratively to the situation of a given person's heart, right? Because the fire in a lot of biblical texts, I think, or even you can see symbolism everywhere. It can be seen as a cleansing process, but it can also be seen as something that's very destructive, depending on the person at hand, right? And also trial by fire, right? I think that's also an important thing to take away from that. Is that when you think about life, right? The fire can either destroy you or make you a better or stronger person. Again, that's dependent on the vessel and the person's heart and their intentions behind it, because a lot of people tend to not go all the way through when it comes to the trials of life, or you can even say God giving you them on this earth world, if you want to think of it like that. There are so many perspectives to take from it, but so I think that's like the biggest thing. And also it can be seen as a form of judgment, but like when you think about judgment, I don't think God per se has feelings. He's not, or the universe. This judgment is actually seen as a correction mechanism that people tend to fall into. They see it as a form to actually excuse themselves into putting themselves into a victim mindset. So that's why fire can either be seen as destructive or potentially a lot more positive than you would originally imagine if you had your eyes set toward the future. That's why it's dependent on the environment of the person at hand or the vessel. We read a lot of we read a lot of verses. I thought the more interesting one was with one of the angels. I forgot. I think it was Angel Raphael, and he supposedly took a hot coal and put it over his mouth, and of course, again, this can be translated to the word, right? Because the word is seen as a form of truth, a truth of reality. I think, whether you're considered to be scientific or religious or a theoretician, the truth can be found in different ways. And the truth can also be seen as the fire that we talk about too, and it also kind of dissolves to the base concept of being led by something higher than yourself, right? Or not being led, depending on whether you actually have eyes that can see or ears that can hear. Figuratively, spiritually, is what I'm trying to say. It all just ties into one compact foundation that can actually kind of that you can kind of build off of through all of the different insinuations of what fire can represent in the Bible, right? It's just seen as that. At its root, it's very. I would say it's fairly straightforward. If you have been somewhat exposed to the symbolism of fire, whether you see it through the Bible or through media or through just any literary source. Of course, it can be hard for some people. Fortunately, I've been through how many I think I went through one pretty big trial by fire in my life so far, and I found myself again. And fortunately, I was strong enough to go through the refinement process as opposed to self-destructing. That took a lot of time, but I'm here, so that's all that really matters. Yeah, so I fortunately got stronger through that process, and I think, well, I mean, you can have as many trial by fires, well, I wouldn't say as many trial by fires, but you can have a lot of them throughout your life if you are conscious enough to put yourself in those kinds of situations. And personally, I feel like that's part of my purpose in life, is to not necessarily maximize my pain in life, but to learn as many things as possible before I leave this planet, right? I've always been, again, like I think truth is an inherent driver of mind, and to reach the truth, sometimes you can't get it from books, not always. You can, but in a lot of cases, you do have to go through life, like the hard things that can't be found in books, unfortunately. So, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, again, I think I could potentially go through another trial by fire because I can see where my limitations lie, or my ego is trying to place me into, right? But I know my limitations are boundless if I decide to let go of my ego in a given situation. I wouldn't say that I'm really influenced by lower emotions. I think I tend to be driven by the higher emotions. Of course, everybody, we're all human, right? So we do dip down into those lower emotions like fear, despair, sadness, jealousy, anger, hate, all that stuff, right? It happens to everybody. We're not like purely divine creatures. But what I'm trying to say is that if you put yourself in those higher emotions, it's a lot easier to traverse through the trials and tribulations of life, as long as you don't let those lower emotions take control of you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, again, I see my whole life as a experiment. I like to see myself as the observer that watches the dominoes fall where they may, to collect more data from my arsenal. It's just simply who I am. I've always been a scientifically minded human. Now I think it's expanded way past just the physical world that we see. I think science can also be applied to the spiritual realm as well. Science and mathematics. I've tried doing it multiple times, and it works effectively. And it's helped me in multiple cases where I was experiencing hardship. So I'm going to keep applying it because it's a useful tool that has been helping me out until I need to use a different tool. But I think mathematics transcends everything, really. I mean, if you want to think of it like that. I wouldn't say it necessarily transcends God, right? But that would be, I think that would be a silly thing to think, right? It's used as an explanation for God, I guess, or to understand Him better, but it doesn't like transcend Him, because God is, well, everything, and nothing can encapsulate God per se. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I'm just contemplating a lot because of the courses, the lessons that I am taking from this. The evangelists actually in Chicago, downtown Chicago, they're actually based over there. I may show up in person. I think I mentioned this already. I still haven't shown up in person, but I'm planning on doing it just out of curiosity to see how it would feel to be there while the pastor is teaching on his board. Yeah, so there's that, and so there was a lot of catch up, and then I had my other course. I keep saying course, I mean lesson. I don't know why I keep saying course. I had my lesson on Monday as well, and that one was also interesting. I think that one was on the broad. I don't like being specific about the verses because, again, I haven't read the verses enough to memorize a good chunk of them. But again, like I can talk about like the overlay or the conceptual thing behind it, which is for the rod, it's seen as a guide. Like again, like this is another form of guidance. It's just different. Like, again, these are parables or figurative. There are a lot of different ways of representing the same thing through figurative language. So that, of course, there's going to be a lot of overlap in the lessons. Because again, we're studying parables. It's not like the way it's discretized is through the different forms of figurative language, as opposed to the different concepts around the Bible, which I prefer to be that way because I'm a conceptual person. It's just how my mind maps everything. Is that I'd rather take a lesson around a concept, and then the different structures or ways in which it's represented in the Bible, right? So you have like that's how a good way to think of it is that I'm a top-down thinker. It's like I start from the abstract and then I go down to concretize the abstract. It's just it's just like where my brain goes instantly. I don't think about all the nuances and the different representations of that particular abstraction. Although I can give examples. Also, that's another reason why I'm not really good at giving examples, because again, like when you think at such a high level, I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard to think about it. You just have to put yourself into a mindset of the things that can arise from that root abstraction or concept, right? It's just how my brain is. So, I mean, that's how my brain segregates everything, right? It's like concept, examples, concept, examples, concept, examples. But that makes sense because I study mathematics. Is how we structure everything, right? If you take any course in higher mathematics, you start off with a particular structure, and then you think about all of its examples or all of its manifestations in that realm, right? It's like if you take a course in abstract algebra, you start talking about like fields, and then you start talking about the representations or the properties of fields. And then once you have all the properties, then you can think about all the different manifestations of those given properties of fields. The real number system is a field. Of course, I don't want to get into the specifics of why the real number system is a field. Unless you've taken a course in abstract algebra, then I wouldn't have to explain that to you. But so it's just how my brain works. So it's just, I think I wouldn't say this. I'm beyond this course to any extent. It's just how my brain thinks about things. It's just, and the pace is kind of slow. I don't know. I drift off quite a bit. I've realized that it seems like more people, I wouldn't say necessarily invested in it more than me, but the way that the teacher teaches these kinds of quote unquote spiritual or figurative topics is different from how I would share it. So therefore, I wouldn't say it's flying over my head, but I tend to drift off pretty quickly because I just like the direct route, as opposed to talking about all of the different permutations, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's fun though. Like again, I think I was talking about the rod in this situation. So the rod is of course seen as like, I don't know if you think about a rod or a scepter or something that's like you think of like it could represent a lot of things. I think he talked about it in multiple ways. He talked about it as like a measuring stick. Yes, you can use a rod as a measuring stick or any consistently like structure or like straight line that's actually at a certain distance. Of course you could use it. Of course that's how we we created our own metric system, was through I don't know the specifics, like I don't even remember like how they came up with the metric system, to be honest with you. It's been so long since I even thought about that. And like, a foot isn't actually necessarily a foot. It's like 12 inches. So again, like, I don't know how they came up with a foot. I think I know how they came up with a stride. Yard, which is a stride. I think that's how they came up with that particular metric, which is a segregation between 3 steps, and then you could think of it that way. It's like a stride's usually around 3 feet. But again, like, it's not like the feet that we think of, right? So I don't know exactly what they used for that particular photo was a monstrosity, but that's probably not a good way to think of it. But yeah, so I don't know. Anyways, where was I going with that? I forgot already. I was talking about the rod. But of course, you can think of it as like a unit of measure that that can also, like, at least without, I'm not sure if they try. I don't remember all of the details of this because I was writing. I took 3 lessons yesterday, so my brain's a bit hazy from all of the stuff that we learned. But it could be used as a way of measuring somebody's maybe heart or soul or spirit, I guess. So that's one way of thinking of the rod, and another way would be think of it as like a form of correction or guidance, right? When I think of I think about like a conductor, right, for a symphony or something, right? He's waving his hand and telling people how to properly, play the instrument, I guess. I don't know. So play the instrument. You know what I mean? Like, actually, I don't know, like how, like all the nuances of that, but yeah. So, and yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. So I guess it can also translate to the scepter of like an authoritative figure, right? The scepter is actually seen in a lot of historical contexts, right? Like a king or some kind of authoritative leader would have a scepter as a representation of them being not just like a physical authority, but a spiritual one as well. Yeah, and they talk about like the iron scepter, which is considered to be held by the one who overcomes. The one who overcomes is somebody. I mean, you can think of it in a lot of ways, but Jesus was definitely the one who overcame to a degree, because he is considered to be the I guess striving representation of somebody that's holy. And he overcame. I mean, to be that holy, of course, you would have to overcome your flesh and your desires and all the things that the world, the physical reality that we live in, gives to you to satisfy you in the short term, but not necessarily help you on the long term. So, yeah, I guess the iron scepter is considered to be, again, another spiritual authority, right? A spiritual authority, and the one who overcomes is somebody that can actually wield that, because it's not necessarily who you are or what your status is in society, but in a much larger metaphysical I guess a much larger metaphysical realm. So I don't know, I'm blanking out on words right now. I guess I'm a little bit lethargic, but there's that part 2, and we talked about that a bit. That was on Monday, and then I think the first course, or the first lesson I took yesterday was on yeast, and again, I think the biggest thing for yeast is that it's seen as, figuratively, as somebody who's a teacher, because yeast is naturally a quote-unquote input-output mechanism, a filtration system. If you want to think of it, I don't think it's filtration, but I like to think of it as an input-output mechanism. And teachers also, well, everything's an input-output mechanism, but in this case, he's kind of tying that to teachers, because teachers take in a lot of information, and they present that in a digestible way. So, yeah, right. Yeast goes through fermentation. It takes in sugar, and it kind of releases CO2. Sorry, there's the word. Releases CO2, and so, of course, that can be seen as a teacher to a degree. Not only that, I think it also grows and expands, right? If you have yeast in bread, you can see it as like the word coming into the soul to fill it up, right? And it can be seen as an expansion mechanism as well, right? A teacher does expand information out to a network of people, so you can think of it in that way. It's a form of expansion in the universal perspective. Even in a more singular perspective, you can think of an expansion in the soul as well, right? Through actually learning lessons through the universe as opposed to reading books all the time. Um, I think that's a good way of thinking of it as. I think there were a lot of other nuanced things that he mentioned, but I think that was like the gist of that. I need to read my home blessings more often. Yeah, basic. Oh yeah, I guess it's like again change. I guess to a degree it's change, right? It makes when if you're into baking at all, you would know that dough the bread expands after a while because of the CO2 that is like the CO2 bubbles that are going into it, right? It's creating little air pockets. So yeah, it's just interesting. Instructions, I guess, teachings and instructions. Now, the sugar can be taken by anybody, but you have to be, there's always like again, it's a little bit binary. Like the course is a little bit binary. There's always like good and bad, and good and evil, and whatnot. So, of course, they distinguish good and bad yeast. The bad teachers and the good teachers, or people who are misguide. The people who are lost, right? The ones who don't necessarily, who haven't reached like a certain level of spiritual maturity, tend to be more desperate, and they have trouble discerning what's true and what's right, or considered to be righteous or morally respectful. So it's just like, of course, I can go both ways, right? You can have the people that take in that particular bit of, I guess you can think of like the sugar as a word, right? There's some people who misinterpret that word, misinterpret it through malicious or more like consciously malicious things, or subconscious, like subconscious. What's the word? Misrepresentations, like of misunderstandings that aren't like kind of seen by the mind, right? Sometimes we tend to not see everything, even though we believe we do. So it's just like it can go both ways. There are people out there who take in the word who probably have good intentions but still don't understand it because they haven't reached a certain height of spiritual maturity, right? So you can still do bad things with good intentions, right? As well as then of course are the conscious people, right? The conscious people who are aware of what they're doing, and they do it for, I guess you could say, evil reasons, or to entertain themselves, or just to be a nuisance, or for their own agenda. There are a lot of different motives behind somebody that's more conscious about skewing the word, right, and making it seen as differently from what is supposed to be seen as from God's perspective, right? Or the truth. So I think that's interesting, I guess. I'm just looking at my like different notes that I took to see if bad and good yeast, right? I guess you could say God's teachings, right? God's yeast is God's teachings. Again, it's the same thing. It's a form of making change as somebody that can actually properly interpret the word or the scripture to create change in the world, right? Because, again, some people have to be fed, right? There's some people who just don't have the spiritual maturity to do it themselves, so that's why you have teachers to take it in and ingest it properly, to then share the word for how it's supposed to be shared, as opposed to what other people believe, right? It's interesting. Yeah, again, there's this topic of overcoming, right? Like the topic of overcoming is, well, again, it's a process of overcoming yourself, right? It's kind of, I think it's kind of self-explanatory, right? When you think of overcoming, it's like battling the person who you were yesterday, or your past, to then properly shed your skin to become something new. So that's the whole process of overcoming, right? And just being aware and conscious of that, and not only being aware and conscious, and actually, putting in the necessary effort to make that change, for yourself or for others, or to help others reach that current, state of consciousness, right? So, yeah, it's all really interesting. I don't know. I'm a little bit tired. I drank too much coffee. I think I'm crashing from that. I've been up since like probably 9ish. Like I mentioned, I have that meeting with the evangelist guy, and I have another meeting today for business reasons, and I have a few other things that I'll probably be doing today. I'm gonna relax a little bit though. Maybe I'll take a nap or something because I'm pretty tired. Yeah. So I guess yeah. There's like there's this other lesson that I'm like halfway through that I still have to finish. So I'm not gonna talk about it probably until like the next couple of days. And I think I'll give an update on Friday. Yeah, I think I'll do that because then I'll have that other lesson plus the other two. So it's like 3 different topics to talk about. So at least it'll have some substance to it. Yeah, aside from that, I haven't been doing a lot. I mean, I had some other like more personal things that I was going through. I don't feel like sharing. I saw some errands to run. I actually got myself a kitchen apron after like 7 months of being a line cook. So there's that, I guess. I think it's nice having that because obviously you don't want to make a mess on, nice shirts that you may have to bring on. I mean, I usually just wear old T-shirts and clothes that I know that I don't value as much as like my newer things that I have. So obviously, I mean, some days you may have. I don't know. Like sometimes I'm lazy and I forget to wash my clothes, and I may have to like use something that's just newer, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So also I had to get headphones, and also I was thinking about like getting a DVD player because it's kind of nostalgic from when I was younger. My dad has some DVDs at home, so maybe once I get to Williamsburg again, which will probably be in a year from now, I can take some of those and I don't know. It would be fun just watching DVDs as opposed to being on streaming services all the time. Yeah. And a couple of other things to tie up the loose ends for my current state of transition. Yeah, I have quite a bit still. I still have quite a bit to do, even though, I don't have like I only have like I'm only working 10 hours a week, but I have the classes and just a lot of things that I do on my own because I tend to be a voracious reader and I like learning as much as possible, so I always have things I can do. Yeah. What else? I don't know what else to talk about. I'm probably just going to take a nap and probably talk to you guys on Friday. Bye-bye.